Hey everybody, I've been thinking a lot about Polytone. This is the latest synthesizer from Reason Studio, and we can use it in the Reason rack in Logic. I had a little bit of envy about this instrument because, as they said in all of their advertising and marketing, how easy it was to come up with great sounds, and how it had this morph mode where you could go between the A version, the B layer. You could create two different sounds and then use a fader or a wheel or velocity to morph between those. And so as you went from one set of settings on one to the other, you can come up with some pretty cool sounds. So here's the A sound. And it's not just a level change. It's not just a fade between them. It's actually a parameter switch between everything on A and everything on B. I definitely felt like there was something really cool about that. And it got me thinking, wait a second. We have so many things that do that in Logic. So I thought maybe if any of you had even seen this or heard about Polytone, which is a decent synthesizer, has some cool things to it. But if you were like, man, I wish I could do some of that morphing inside Logic, I wanted to go over just two of the most obvious, blatant ways that Logic kills Polytone in the sense of the morph. One of them is a relatively old instrument at this point, which is Sculpture. And Sculpture has one main face, right? One interface. And this is the old style of Logic plugin. Maybe at some point we'll get new interfaces for some of these old ones. So what we have down here is this morph pad, which gives us an A, B, C, D, and then a center point and a little ball. Now, without going into all of the details, because there are a number of things you actually have to know about with this instrument. I've made other videos about this. I just want to talk about this morphing thing for 1 second, which if I move this around, you'll see various parameters shifting. Not all of them, probably partly because of the way it's programmed, but in this case, they just have a few things changing. Let me play a little bit of this one. So right off the bat, one of the big advantages to the morph pad here in Sculpture over Polytone is that we have these 5 anchor points. So instead of just an A and a B, we have 5 different complete settings that we can morph between. That's pretty cool. Certainly not as simple because we don't just have the 2 faces and the 2 instruments we're programming, but I will say having 5 is really cool. And when we move this around, you're going to see which parameters are actually moving. That is a bigger deal to me in many ways because I like to be able to see that in Polytone. You can't see those things moving. You just have to know that you're going between A and B and switch between those 2 synths. So certainly maybe a little elegance with Polytone that we don't have here. Far more power with this. On top of that, you can see the mode button where my mouse is. If we switch this to envelope, we can actually draw a path for this to morph over time. And we can maybe even find some better examples of that. Let me just scan through a few of these and we'll see if we find. You'll see a lot of these use the morph, but not all of them. And the ones that have a pathway in that view, like here's one as an example. It just keeps going and going. One other difference between these two is that you can't change every parameter. There's a number of things on Sculpture which really wouldn't work as a morph item, and so it's not able to control every parameter in the front of this, but it is able to control a lot of the material and the objects and things like that, which are the key parts of the building blocks of this instrument. So that's one thing right off the bat, and I was like, you know what? Duh, we have such amazing morphing abilities on some of our instruments. The other one, of course, would be Alchemy. Now, Alchemy has the performance pads. So we have these 8 pads down at the bottom, and each of these are attached to pretty much any parameter. The modulation engine inside Alchemy is really incredible. It's deep. It's almost too deep. Which again, someone using the Reason Polytone might say, well, you're going to come up with the results a lot faster. Maybe true. But I will say a couple more things about that in a second. It may be true. However, anything that you can think of in terms of modulation, you can come up with using this. And some of the sounds are just incredible. I like this synth pluck here. Right. So each of these pads, you have these 8 knobs plus 4, like the envelope knobs, and then 2 XY pads. And you can attach pretty much anything in this to these knobs. And then when you move it to the different placement here, you adjust the settings of all of these knobs, and then you can move it between them into a morph in between. And again, we have visual cues of what's happening. So you'll see these orange lines around the knobs and blue lines around them. That's indicating modulation. So you can see there's a lot of things happening. There are far more modulation controls with Alchemy than Polytone can even dream about. And so I think that the power here is incredible. Now you might say, well, sure, but with Polytone, we can get a lot more done because it's simpler. We just have the 2 and we can morph between them. Well, sure, that may be the case, but right out of the gate, let's look at just the presets we have here for this. So, I don't know, a couple hundred maybe, right? I mean, that's all of the things that they determined that you could get, build out with that. They didn't want to do more presets, or for whatever reason, they didn't include more presets. Well, let's look at the Alchemy preset engine. So if you're thinking that's too complicated, but let's just browse these. We have 3,749 presets, all organized by category, subcategory, genre, timbre, and rating. Plus, you can do your own tags if you want. You don't have to know how to program Alchemy. You don't have to. I mean, you can just manipulate some things later, but you could go through and find, there's over 3,500 presets alone in various categories, subcategories, genres, and timbres. There's so much here. So you can just use this as a preset instrument if you wanted to, on top of everything else that you can do with this. The morphing tools, I think they're just unmatched. If anything, there are other instruments that are as good, but there are very few that I would ever consider better in terms of the ability to morph and mangle and adjust your sound. So when other workstations come out with these things like Polytone and we think, ooh, is the grass greener on the other side? Just remember that if other software is doing it, aside from the few holy grail type items, and those might be, more like smart EQs and compressors and, things with pitch. And even that logic is so good right now. I mean, there are some tools out there that I think are incredible. Some of the isotope stuff, the oak sound stuff. I mean, there's things out there that I wish Logic could do, but apart from those like really bleeding edge things, Logic, in terms of traditional synthesis and traditional instruments and effects, if you're thinking, wow, Reason just released this and it's amazing, I really want it, there's a really good chance that Logic can already do it.